Morning, everyone. A very big welcome to our Magic Morning. I will just give another moment or so for people to get their cups of tea, finish any breakfast that they might be having and enjoying before introducing today's Magic Morning. I know we have quite a lot of attendees planning to join us today, so we'll just give them another moment. You can see who our speakers are going to be today, and also the topic that we're going to be covering. And one thing we just wanted to highlight a couple of housekeeping, although we're getting all very good at using Zoom, making sure that if you would like to turn on the captions, you can do so just at the bottom of your screen. And next to the turn on and show captions option, you've also got slightly to the left the Q&A button. And we would very much welcome and appreciate you adding your questions in. I'll try and make sure that at the end of the presentations, there's an opportunity for some of your questions to be raised with our absolutely brilliant panel of speakers today. So one thing to touch on today's Magic Morning is about our provision in special educational needs schools and the fantastic work of partners and of schools and of the children there who every single day enjoy and take part in a Magic Breakfast. One of the things we wanted to note is that Magic Breakfast is obviously experts and specialists in breakfast provision. We're not experts and specialists in special education needs or additional special needs schools, as they're often referred to in Scotland. And so we are joined wonderfully by some external experts. We are going to be sharing our very own research manager, Martin, will be sharing some research and some information with you all. But we wanted to make sure that this topic was covered because it is so important, and that came through in our research, as you'll hear from Martin later on, the importance and the additional and different sometimes impact that breakfast provision can have in schools for children with special educational needs. As I mentioned, please keep your questions coming throughout the session. And without further ado, I will now invite Martin Reimert to join our research manager for Magic Breakfast and to give us a little bit of the context and the evidence base. Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. As Lindsay mentioned, I am the research manager here at Magic Breakfast. And as part of my role here, I collect, analyze, and share insights with our staff and external stakeholders, including insights on the SEND sector. So in my presentation today, I will look at the particular challenges facing SEND students in SEND schools and Magic Breakfast's role in supporting these pupils and schools. So as Lindsay touched on, SEND pupils and SEND schools are a focus area for Magic Breakfast, and it speaks to the value in our mission statement, which is to end morning hunger as a barrier to learning for all children and young people. So to contextualize the current climate in the SEND sector, I will run through some general statistics. And to begin with, I wanted to highlight that throughout my presentation, I will refer to the student group and schools as special educational needs and disability students, or SEND students, and special educational needs, or SEND schools. But it's important to just note that in Scotland, these students are referred to as additional needs students and additional needs schools. So in 2023, over 1.5 million students in England had special educational needs, which is an increase of 87,000 students since 2022. And in Scotland, in the same year, there were approximately 240,000 children and young people with additional support needs, which is over a third of all students in Scotland. And this is just to note that there are a significant number of SEND students, and also that this student group is growing. Next slide, please. So why are we focusing on SEND students and SEND schools as a charity? So we recognize that some groups in society are at particular risk of disadvantage, and this is also true for the children and young people that we support. So one of these groups is children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. And although SEND students receive support from the government, they face significant barriers to their education and life beyond. And also, SEND students are overrepresented on many disadvantage metrics, and I will highlight some of these now. So next slide, please. So the first one is free school meal eligibility. So students with SEND are more than twice as likely to be eligible for free school meals compared to their non-SEND students. So you can see that 28% of all SEND students are eligible for free school meals compared to only 13% of the non-SEND students. And this means that SEND students are more likely to grow up in low-income households. This can be because of a variety of different reasons. For example, families of children with special educational needs are more likely to have additional costs associated with their child's health status, and therefore more at risk of being pushed into poverty. There are also some evidence to suggest intergenerational disability, which means that there's a higher likelihood for a child to be identified with a learning disability if that child lives with parents who also have a disability. And disabled households, we know that disabled households are at much higher risk of low income compared to non-disabled households. We also have some anecdotal evidence from the communities we work in that parents to children with complex needs are also less likely to be able to work full-time due to caring responsibilities, and this also impacts on their household income. So next slide, please. So educational attainment. In 2022, students receiving SEND support are over a year behind their peers in their education in reception year. And this gap grows to over 18 months by the end of primary school and reaches almost 2 years by the end of secondary schools. And just to highlight here that this stat refers to students enrolled in SEND schools and not all SEND students. And as you can see on this graph, this is higher than the attainment gap between disadvantaged students and their wealthier peers, which highlights that SEND students are significantly educationally disadvantaged and have some of the largest attainment gaps of any student group. And this, I think, also highlights the fact that SEND students are not receiving enough support or the right support with their education currently. Next slide, please. So in terms of school absence, in the aftermath of the pandemic, what we've seen is that absence rates have continued to be higher than pre-pandemic, which has been true across the education sector and the levels of education. But students attending SEND schools remain the group of students with the highest absence rates, as you can see on the graph. So in England, almost 40% of students in special schools are persistently absent from schools, which is significantly higher than students in mainstream secondary schools at 26.5% and students in mainstream primary schools at 16.2%. Some of the reasons why absence rates are higher at SEND schools is that their pupils may have lengthy or repeated periods of absence from schools due to their health conditions. Some of these students might experience more anxiety and heightened emotions during morning time, and some of these students might have trouble getting enough sleep. And we also know that due to the fact that there are significantly less SEND schools compared to mainstream schools, many students attending SEND schools have to travel further to get to schools, which also impact on attendance rates. Next slide, please. So how's Magic Breakfast qualified to speak on this topic? So first, Magic Breakfast, as a charity, we support a significantly higher number of SEND schools compared to the national average. So 14% of the schools that we support currently are SEND schools, which is significantly higher than the national average of 4.2%. And I think this equates to around 112, 113 schools currently. And in Scotland, 20% of the schools that we support are ASN schools, compared to 4.4% national average. And almost half of the students on roll at our partner schools in Scotland have additional support needs, which is slightly higher compared to 36% of all students in Scotland. And this just speaks to the fact that a significant number of the students that we support have educational support needs. Secondly, we have made significant adaptations to our program to support SEND students, such as introduction of nurture groups as a breakfast provision model. So this type of breakfast model targets students most at risk, which in mainstream schools very often are SEND students. And by offering provision in a smaller environment, students attending nurture group can have a soft start to their morning, which can be especially important for some SEND students who have particular needs. And last but not least, our engagement partners. So Many of our engagement partners have experience working with SEND students and SEND schools, either from past experience in the education sector as ex-teachers, or through experience supporting these students and schools through their role here at Magic Breakfast. Next slide, please. So how do we support SEND schools? As I said, our EPs play a crucial part in supporting our partner schools, and some of this includes school visits, setting up an optimal breakfast provision, and setting up a breakfast provision based on the individual need of the school. And because of the specific circumstances for SEND schools and their students, this support becomes even more important for these schools. So in terms of what this support looks like, in preparation for this event, I met with some of our APs who support the most number of SEND schools. And I wanted to focus on three main aspects to our support of SEND schools that were highlighted as crucial to a successful breakfast provision. So the first one is being flexible. After altering our breakfast provision to suit needs is particularly important in support to our SEND schools, as mentioned. For example, many of the SEND schools we support offer a classroom provision, as many of their students find it easier to cope in smaller groups. And classroom provision is also a way to build up a safe place. Also, certain food items won't work in SEND schools due to specific needs of students, and this may be due to sensory needs, not being able to chew, needing crunchy food, or only eating specifically branded food. Number two is being creative in finding solutions to overcome these barriers, and this is an important part of our support to SEND schools. And an example of a creative solution could be to allow for a wider time window for when breakfast is served or eaten, to allow for some students having to take medication, for example, around breakfast time, which may impact on their appetites and behavior. And the last thing I wanted to mention is around patience in setting up breakfast provision, trialing creative solutions, and also seeing a positive impact. So because of the fact that many SEND students have specific needs, it may be a slower process, making them feel comfortable with eating a breakfast in the morning or the type of foods that they eat. So a healthy eating approach in SEND schools can therefore be more challenging, for example, when students will only eat certain foods. But by embedding a healthy and varied food offer into students' daily school breakfast, what we have seen over time is that many of these students adapt a healthier breakfast diet. So in summary, our flexible approach to supporting SEND schools mean that not only are we able to ensure SEND students have access to a healthy meal to start their school day, but this provision also supports with students' independence and learning skills, their self-confidence, their communication, and their critical thinking skills. Next slide, please. And in addition to the learnings from our engagement partners, we also know about the positive impact we make for SEND students and SEND schools through our own internal research. And according to a research project that we conducted last year, families with children with SENDs or household with disabilities reported that school breakfast provision supported managing hectic and challenging mornings. Some families spoke of their children being required to take medication at certain times and needing to eat a certain amount before or after taking this medication. And it was reassuring for these families that their children could get something to eat at school before lessons began. And we also know from this research that staff very much encouraged students with SEND students to attend breakfast provision in the morning. So that was a little bit about the SEND sector and Magic Breakfast support to SEND students and SEND schools. Should you have any questions, I'd be very happy to answer these in the Q&A session at the end. And I'm going to end my presentation here and hand back over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Martin. And I think highlighting the work of the engagement partners is absolutely key, because having visited and having had the privilege of visiting lots of our partner schools, especially those supporting children with special educational needs, they always speak to that opportunity to learn from, hear from our EPs, but also other schools who they connect them with. So thank you for that. I'm really delighted to introduce our next speaker, Lydia Lings. She is the Chief Executive of SEND Support, also a qualified qualified Makaton tutor, and I will let Lydia give some information, insight as to what Makaton is.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, and thank you, Magic Breakfast, for having me today. I'm just going to explain a bit about what I do, and we're going to just talk a little bit about some of the additional needs that the partners are looking after and caring for when they are serving breakfast. So SEND Support is a community interest company. Our aim is to support parents, carers and professionals working with children with SEND. We support parents through a mix of courses, mainly Makaton Sign Language, and we also help with resources such as communication cards, now and next boards. And we run 2 different groups a week where we work with children who 0 to 5 who have communication difficulties, supporting them with language development through play. And I've worked with children with SEND for nearly 10 years in many different contexts, ranging from working as a one-to-one in a mainstream school, running SEND sessions in children's centres, and with my own son at home. I've taught childminders, schools, nurseries, supported them in their Makaton journey, and some of our customers have been the London Borough of Bromley, the Royal Borough of Greenwich, NHS, Legoland, and of course Magic Breakfast. So, next slide, please. So what is, Martin did a good job of explaining SEN earlier, but the NHS states that a child or young person has special educational needs and disabilities if they have a learning difficulty and or are a disability that means they have they need special health and education support. It's a very short way of explaining the main difficulties that affect children who have SEND. And by all means, we cannot go in to every single SEND condition that our children face, because we would be here all day. But I will try to highlight some of the more understood conditions, or as, next slide, please, as gov.uk states, some of the more prominent conditions, particularly within the UK. So gov.uk states that autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, is the most common SEND need in the UK, and those needing SEND support, so special educational needs support, are those with speech and language needs. So yeah, and you can see on the screen at the moment, these are the most common SEND needs that our children are facing. Okay, next slide. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about autism, and I know full well that yeah, this is very, very truncated, but just to give you a bit of an insight. So autism is a condition where there are differences in brain development, which can cause children and adults to struggle with social communication, verbal communication, and their ability to interact with the world around them. Transitions and change can be very difficult. Being able to read facial expressions can sometimes cause them to not understand how people are thinking or feeling, and generally understanding their own emotions is incredibly difficult. Some children may stim, which is having repetitive behaviours which they engage in to help regulate their emotions. So I don't know if you may have seen children kind of stimming in this way or saying words over and over again. That's them trying to regulate their own emotions. Also, many children with autism can experience sensory processing disorder, where noises or smells may impact them negatively, or they may seek out sensory input like moving constantly or licking things. So how can we help? So use visuals to support transitions. So visuals saying what's happening now, what's happening next, giving extra time for processing new information. Be aware if the children are sensory avoiders. Can we reduce the smells taking place where they eat? Or can we reduce the extra noise such as music or fans? Next slide, please. Another one is ADHD. It is a neurodevelopment condition which mainly affects behaviour, executive functioning, and emotional regulation. There is still lots to learn about ADHD, but it is believed that there is an underdevelopment in the prefrontal cortex, so the front of the brain. And that is the part of the brain that is responsible for executive functioning, so planning, thinking ahead. People with ADHD also have less dopamine than neurotypical people. Dopamine is responsible for feeling good, for being able to focus and being interested in things, which is why children with ADHD fidget a lot if they have the hyperactive type. They can't stay focused and can only really engage if they are really interested in something, which is called hyperfocus. Regular routines can be really tricky for children because of the need for executive functioning that is so needed in everyday life. Remembering to eat, or even remembering how to make breakfast every day can be difficult as they struggle to do activities that need sequences. So again, how can we help, particularly in supporting breakfast? Use visuals, picture timetables, or visual reminders of how to make breakfast. We have a lot of recipe cards around our house on how to particularly make set food. They can process the visual and remember the visual far more than verbal instructions. Okay, next slide. Speech and language difficulties, a very, very common need, particularly in the UK, and particularly has risen since COVID. Speech and language difficulties can impact a child's ability to learn language, understand language, and talk. There are lots and lots of reasons why someone may have difficulty with speech and language, and it can be anything from one of the conditions we've recently just mentioned, or down to their environment. Speech and language difficulties can be having a lisp or stammering, not being able to pronounce words properly, or not using expressive language. Particularly not being able to speak impacts everything. So from getting your needs understood or expressing your feelings. And if they struggle in their speech, then they struggle at school with reading and writing, pushing them even further behind their peers. Even down to something like ordering breakfast. If you can't speak, it can put a huge barrier in the way. So how can we help? Again, you must have heard by now, I really love visuals. So use visuals and use sign language, such as Makaton. Next slide, please. So there are many ways in which we can support communication. Firstly, we've got Makaton. I know I'm biased, but I do love it. Makaton is a language program that supports children who struggle to speak, and it uses symbols and signs and speech to support language development, but also to help in communication. Then we have something called PECS, which is a picture exchange communication system. Pictures are used and put into lines to make sentences, or pictures can be used to express needs and feelings. Then there's things like switches. They're recordable switches and are great for ways to communicate. So you can see on the picture down there of the switches, each one of those could be a different part of the breakfast, and they press the button and that speaks for them. Then there's BSL, which is British Sign Language. That is a language. It's a recognised language within the UK now. Rather than a language programme, it's an actual language. And people who are deaf use BSL specifically to express their needs and their feelings and to communicate more broadly. So I just wanted to think, next slide, please. I just wanted to think about what can affect breakfast time. Martin did hint at it, but I wanted to give you a bit of a real life example. So the answer to the question, what can affect breakfast time, is actually anything. But let me give you an example of one of our mornings recently. So my son has ASD, ADHD, and basically breakfast was affected from the evening before. My son was doing his SATs, so he was anxious. So bedtime was a lot trickier. He then woke up unhappy, needed to change his morning routine and have a shower first. This upset the whole of the morning routine. Then our cat, who never leaves the garden, or if she does, she comes straight back, left the garden and didn't come straight back. This made me anxious, which then made my son even more anxious, which meant he didn't want to eat breakfast. She didn't come back before school, so this again, the cat that is, this again was out of our normal routine. School very helpfully put on breakfast during SATS week so that the children could come in early, eat together before they go and have their SATs. But this affected the time, the change in time affected him having his meds for his ADHD, which means he doesn't eat. And so all of that meant he took his meds, he didn't eat breakfast, and I knew I was sending him to school without breakfast, and how he did his SATs, I never know, but he did. So basically, breakfast can be affected from something as simple as a cat walking off to smells, change of staff, things going wrong at home, being poorly, change of routine, or amazingly, if the weather is slightly different. When children with ASD and ADHD thrive on a regular routine, anything that changes that routine impacts them. Say there is a different member of staff in the room where you do breakfast, or heaven forbid, the normal jam you have was out of stock and a different one has been sent. Or it might be raining, or the room might be too hot. Another reason could be that there's a different smell in the room, and a lot of these things you cannot mitigate for. But if you do have an idea of what could mess up breakfast time, you can walk in their shoes, you can support them in it. So next slide, please. That is what I wanted to kind of share with you this morning, a bit of a day in the life of, but also some of the different conditions that I myself and Lauren in our partner schools are dealing with on a daily basis.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for sharing those insights of what can happen on a day-to-day basis that has an impact on children's breakfast. Just for those of you who have just joined, please don't forget to add in questions into the Q&A. We have our final speaker coming up now, and after that we'll be doing Q&A, so you'll have an opportunity to hear again from our experts. So I'm delighted to introduce Lauren Casely, who is from one of our partner schools in Northumberland. And I was saying to Lauren, it's just over 2 years since I had the absolute privilege and joy of visiting, and it still stands out to me as one of the most magical school visits that I've ever had at Magic Breakfast. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Lauren sharing with all of us a little bit of the magic. Thank you.
So firstly, I would like to thank you all for kindly inviting me to attend this event and present on behalf of Cleaswell Hill School. Next slide. Cleaswell Hill is an outstanding day community special school in Guidepost, Northumberland for 232 children with a designated age range of 3 to 19. Cleaswell Hill School consists of a large main site and a smaller satellite site, both of which are situated amongst 20% of the most deprived neighbourhoods in the country. 49.6% of pupils that currently attend Cleaswell Hill School are eligible for pupil premium funding and free school meals. All of the children that attend Cleaswell Hill School have an Education Health and Care Plan, an EHCP, previously named Statement of Education, Special Educational Needs. The children at Gleeswell Hill School have complex learning difficulties and disabilities, and some have additional physical, sensory, communication, or emotional needs. Diagnoses range from cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, hearing impairment, autism, ADHD, visual impairment, and epilepsy, to name a few. Next slide, please. The children that attend Gleeswell Hill School are taught within small class groups with a high staff ratio and access a wide range of therapeutic input, including speech and language therapy, rebound therapy, hydrotherapy, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, music therapy, and more. The dynamic staff team provides specialist learning opportunities tailored to each pupil's individual needs to maximise academic progress and the development of key life skills. Every child follows a broad and responsive curriculum that is appropriate to their age and/or stage of development, delivered within a positive, safe, and stimulating setting. Next slide, please. With no previous breakfast provision in place, Gleeswell Hill School aimed to provide a nourishing breakfast for all pupils at no cost to parents or carers to ensure that no child started their school day hungry. Many of the pupils that attend Gleeswell Hill School travel in taxis or minibuses, some of which cover considerable distances. Therefore, we aim to provide an opportunity for pupils to regulate and refuel during the registration period, promoting concentration, engagement, and attainment throughout the morning. Next slide, please. As a result of the identified need and extensive research, Gleeswell Hill School were delighted to partner with Magic Breakfast in December 2021. Magic Breakfast kindly awarded Gleeswell Hill School a £500 startup grant to purchase a small fridge, microwave, utensils, bowls, plates to equip each classroom for the breakfast provision. Next slide. Since December 2021, Magic Breakfast has enabled every child at Gleeswell Hill School to access a nourishing breakfast of cereal, toast, bagels, beans, porridge, or crumpets every morning during their registration. The provision of a varied range of cereals and food items encourages pupils to experience and taste a wide variety of nutritional breakfast foods. We are also thrilled that Magic Breakfast have recently begun to supply Gleeswell Hill School with cartons of UHT milk, widening the Magic Breakfast offer. All of the children across the school are encouraged to consume breakfast upon their arrival, with a focus on the development of social, motor, communication, and independence skills. For example, many pupils utilise resources such as communication boards, PECS, which is Picture Exchange Communication System, VOCAs, Voice Activated Communication Aids, and iGaze to request Magic Breakfast items. Pupils are also encouraged to prepare, consume, and clear away their breakfast items each day. Next slide. And this slide demonstrates the use of PECS on the left, and so that's the Picture Exchange Communication System. And on the right there, we have a child using a communication board to request breakfast items. Next slide. Magic Breakfast have also very kindly previously provided pupils with Amazon deliveries of food items during school holiday periods, and several deliveries of books from Marcus Rashford's book club during our partnership, both of which have been gratefully received. Feedback from staff members, parents, carers, and pupils about Magic Breakfast has been overwhelmingly positive. Magic Breakfast engagement partners conduct regular monitoring visits to our school and provide fantastic support and guidance as required. Next slide. Without the support of Magic Breakfast, this provision would not be possible. We are extremely grateful to all of the Magic Breakfast partners for their generosity. The impact of Magic Breakfast at Gleeswell Hill School is immeasurable. Your support enables 232 children with special educational needs and disabilities to begin their school day with a nutritional breakfast and a multitude of additional learning opportunities to develop key life skills that will impact the rest of their lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I think we're going to bring everybody now back onto the screen for our Q&A session. And I would encourage everyone who's attended to please put your questions into the channel. We'll make sure that we can bring everyone in. I'm going to start just by asking, sharing with you, Lydia, some lovely feedback from one of our attendees, how wonderful the presentation was, with really clear, simple slides and visuals. So lots of appreciation for those. Lydia, I was just interested, picking up on what you were sharing in the kind of practical sense of supporting children with special educational needs. I suppose, what do you see as, one of the key areas that you feel Magic Breakfast could look to or explore improving, developing our knowledge or understanding and support for, schools and children and young people, reflecting on, I suppose, Martin's remit to do research and to build our insight and understanding, and what Lauren shared in terms of what we practically offer at the moment?
Yeah, thanks so much. And I guess for me, it would be my main thoughts would be around mainstream schools. You can see from Lauren's slides, they do a fantastic job of enabling each of their children to be able to access breakfast and to communicate their needs. It was just so wonderful to see, so thanks, Lauren. But I think having worked in mainstream schools with children with SEN, not every child with SEN has the privilege to go to a fantastic SEN school, but having worked in mainstream schools, being able for Magic Breakfast to be able to enable mainstream schools to bring those provisions of visuals particularly, or those switches, visuals, being able for Magic Breakfast to enable mainstream school children with SEN to express their need for breakfast, or what they want for breakfast, or actually, am I feeling just so overwhelmed today I can't eat breakfast, or what would make it different for me to be able to eat breakfast? So yeah, having just kind of a set, even 6 signs on the wall as a poster might be a really good idea. So children, even if they just point at it, it makes them access it a lot easier.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lydia. Lauren, I'm going to come to you with the next question, which is one of our favorites at Magic Breakfast. If you had a magic wand, what one change would you, ask for to offer better support for the SEND sector as a whole? And Martin, as a heads up, I might come to you next in terms of any thoughts or reflections you might have from a research perspective. And Lydia, I know you've got quite a busy morning, but if you're still with us, I'll also ask you that question as well. Thank you. So Lauren, over to you.
I think the main thing that it all comes down to is money at the end of the day. We're incredibly lucky at this school. We have a very, very experienced, dynamic staff team who are very, very dedicated to their roles. And it's just ensuring that we have that funding to provide this outstanding service to all children with special educational needs, not just in special schools, but also in mainstream provision. And it's also important, I think, our school does a lot of outreach work, so it's also getting experienced practitioners, teachers who have worked with children with SEND, who are very experienced in that area, to go out to mainstream schools and provide some outreach support and guidance resources. So things like, we'll be more than happy to share some of our communication boards with the cereals, the breakfast, the porridge around that. We're more than happy to share things like that with other schools, with mainstream schools, because we know funding's tight in all schools, so sharing that support and knowledge with each other, and we're more than happy to do that.
Thanks, Lauren. Martin, I'll ask you if you've got any thoughts in terms of that magic wand. And one other question that's come in, if you could just pick up, is how many schools does Magic Breakfast currently support that are SEND schools?
Yes, so to answer the last question first, I guess, I think it's 112, 113 schools that we currently support that are special educational needs schools. I'm afraid my answer is going to be quite similar to Lauren's, I guess. What we've seen from the SEND sector, I guess, is that because of the increasing number of students with special educational needs, we've seen a increased pressure on not only SEND schools, but as Lauren kind of pointed to as well, mainstream schools as well. And I do think that increased funding for setting up additional SEND schools and increased investment into support of SEND students in mainstream schools will take the pressure off of both mainstream schools and SEND schools in terms of the support that they're able to give to students who need additional support. And I also think that if you look at the kind of the current support and the needs at the moment, so there was a Freedom of Information request submitted this year, which showed that there are currently more than 20,000 applicants for an education, health and care plan who waited for longer than the limit of 20 weeks, and as many as 3,000 applicants who waited for over a year. And I think this just highlights both the growing numbers of students with learning disabilities and also the need to invest in a system that has capacity to support all children and young people.
Brilliant. Thanks, Martin. And Lydia, anything you wanted to add?
No, not really. I think they've said it brilliantly. Yeah, sorry, that's my shutter going up. If you can hear the noise. No, I won't add anything to that.
Thanks, Lydia. Lauren, another question for you, if it's all right. How do you communicate with parents and carers in the community about the Magic Breakfast provision? And, have you faced any either barriers or questions from parents, or are they, largely bought in? Interesting to hear about the wider community.
Our whole school, when we launched in 2021, we had a big launch. We used School Ping, which is an electronic communication system with parents. So it's a bit like sending emails to all parents. We sent out pings to all the parents. We put it on Facebook, on the website. We have posters around the school building. And because our whole school engages with Magic Breakfast all at the same time, the offer is open to all children. We've just had positive feedback really from parents and carers. It works incredibly well. Children choose whether they want to have breakfast that day or not, but the food is always available for them. And it's really just that constant communication with parents through Ping, through the posters, through Facebook, the website. Obviously, we talk about it when parents come into school, because all of our children have special educational needs and disabilities. The parents come in for not only parents' evenings, but they're also in school for children's EHCP reviews on an annual basis. And then quite often we see them on the yard, or we'll give them a phone call. So communication is really key here. It's really strong at this school. And it's just making sure that everybody's aware, it's open to all, no matter what their personal circumstances are. And we try to be as inclusive as possible as to the offer we provide with Magic Breakfast.
Thanks, Lauren. That's brilliant to hear. A very timely, given it's Volunteers Week at the moment, and we're celebrating this as well at Magic Breakfast, from Thomas, who's going to be joining one of our wonderful Aspiration Days. I don't know if you're hosting any of these, Lauren, but it would be wonderful if maybe you do in future, if not already. So Thomas is attending an Aspiration Day with colleagues at a local school and wonders what are the important things to consider in terms of behaviour, language, mannerisms, etc., particularly when interacting with SEND pupils. And Lauren and Lydia may be interested to hear both your thoughts and reflections on this.
Lauren, do you want to go first?
Pause, yes. I would say time. Give children time, so interact with them, smile with them, maybe it's a high five of this pump, and give them time. A lot of children at our school need that little bit of extra time just to process the information, to process the environment, to process the situation. But by all means, happy, smiley face, say hello. But if you do ask a question, be aware that some children may be pre-verbal, non-verbal, they may use pictures like we discussed earlier. So obviously involve the member of staff that they're with. And yeah, just give them time and happy smiley face.
Yeah, and I think to add to that as well, this might seem a bit strange, but just don't be afraid. These children are completely fantastic, and they might come over and they might rub your face, or they might hold your hand, or they might, in my case, sometimes they might lick you, who knows? But just don't be afraid, because they have got so much to give. And yeah, just reach out a hand and hold it if they ask you to, or, rub their face.
Thank you both. A question, I don't know if it would be best for Lauren or for Lydia. So I open it up for either of you to pick this one up. One of the questions from Alan is wondering, how is support provided when pupils are moving schools? Is that kind of pathway in place? Is that a supported transition? I've certainly heard some feedback from schools that I've visited recently, possibly about the lack of pathways, but interested in your experiences and what you're hearing in your communities. Why don't we go to you, Lydia, in the first instance, and then to Lauren, if that's okay.
Yeah, I do wonder, it would be interesting to hear Lauren's feedback, but my main experiences with mainstream schools, and I think it can really depend on the school. Really, some schools do it really well. I know in a school I used to work in, even between changing years, we'd make a transition pack for each of our children with SEN. So their pictures of their new teacher, their new classroom, we'd take them to their new classrooms. So yeah, that was put in by the school. And then, you know, in terms of transitioning to secondary school, again, it all depends on where you are and the local authority. Some children, it works really well for them. Some children, I mean, we are transitioning over to secondary school and we're not experiencing that support in transition from the local authority, but I think it just depends. And I think for any parents on here, as a parental, you know, you just got to ask, and, you know, not kind of fight for it, but you've just got to ask, and because actually you are the cheerleader for your child. So, you know, I know for me and my son, you know, going to visit the school more often is going to be more beneficial, and so that's what we've done. And I think, yeah, it depends on the school. I think it depends on the parents, but yeah, just be a cheerleader.
Very similar to what Lydia said, our transition period started last month actually for the children that will be with us from September. We focus on the individual child. So some children, it's really useful for our staff to go out to their current setting, whether they're in a nursery or another school, and they might go there and visit them, see their likes, dislikes, how they work in that particular setting, how they can be supported in our setting. For some children, we go out to their home and their setting, or just their home, if that's what would be best for that child. And in some cases, the children come into school and they might join the class that they would be joining ready for September for a few days on a weekly basis, a one-off basis. We really focus on what that child needs. Some children, it's best just not to do anything at all, other than maybe the occasional pictures or the pack, as Lydia explained, sending home, because that might cause a little bit of anxiety if we do it too early, so maybe waiting a bit longer. Some children like to be really prepared, and from sort of May time, it's being drip fed, ready for September, so they're really well prepared. So we really take the approach of each individual child and catering for their needs and what's best for them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lauren. We've got quite a few questions coming in around the topic of food, so I'm going to try and bulk them together. But the first one I'll actually pick up, which is a question to Magic Breakfast, essentially. What are the biggest challenges that your charity faces in providing breakfast food to SEND schools? And I think it's exactly the same challenge that we face with all of our schools, but we're particularly conscious of the impact it has for children and young people with SEN. So what we really need ideally is kind of the ability to long-term plan, you know, to have consistency, certainty, stability, and sustainability of our, you know, our operations generally, but of our breakfast food. And when food items change, I know that, you know, that can cause operational challenges for many of our partner schools, and that might be because a particular food item has increased in cost quite a bit. For partners who have been with us over the last few years, you know that we've, you know, definitely not been unaffected by the rising cost of living and food inflation in particular. But we know, and we hear very much from our EPs, our engagement partners, the impact and the challenge that that might mean for children who, as Lydia, you brilliantly outlined, that change and that, you know, impact on routine can be such a destabilizing and damaging experience. So we're very conscious about the sustainability and stability of our food items. And building on food, so Lauren, there's a couple of questions. One is, what food do you offer in your Magic Breakfast provision? I know some foods and smells can provide sensory overload for some children. Is the food kept quite plain, or is there a lot of colourful choice? And a second part, if that's all right. I don't think you're meant to ask multi-part questions, but we'll break the rules. The second piece was just wondering if you could expand on the importance of play when interacting with food, and how does this benefit consumption of food during breakfast?
Okay, so we offer everything that Magic Breakfast provides. So we have cereal, crumpets, toast, and bagels, and we have the new UHT milk as well, which has been a fantastic addition. It is available to all pupils at the same time throughout the school. They're more than welcome, as I said earlier, to have it one day and not have it the next, or to change it up. We provide butter as well, so the children can have butter on their toast or bagels. And it's really free choice of everything that Magic Breakfast provides. They provide a brilliant range of cereals as well, so there's not just one or two choices, there is a wide range. There's also porridge, and that comes in very handy during the winter months, and we do encourage a lot of our children to prepare that themselves. So that's the pouring, the stirring, the using the microwaves that the Magic Breakfast grant paid for, to develop those life skills. And that kind of touches on the next question about the importance of play and development of skills, in that if the children don't want to eat the food, interacting with that food is very important as well. We have children with RFID, restrictive food intake, and a lot of our children have nutritionists, and it's not just about getting them to put the food in their mouths, but it's also about the children interacting with different types of food, and then the hope is that eventually they'll try some, they'll consume some. And also the importance of play is incredibly important. So sometimes we encourage the children to play with the food, again, to get used to it, the different textures, the sounds. I know we talked a lot about sensory today, the smells, and just playing with the food, interacting with the food is just as important as eating it to us, and becoming familiar with a wider diet.
Can I just add about the play? So I mainly work with children who are 0 to 5, and so actually we use a lot of cereal in our play, and so play is a way of children processing the world around them. It you know, play is their work. It's the way that they learn new skills. It's the way that their brain develops, and so we actually use a lot of cereal. So we might have a play tray of a farm, and there'll be Weetabix for hay bales. There might be cornflakes in a safari activity, and it's all about them feeding the animals. They play with it, they crunch it. I mean, I saw a little child the other day, she filled up a cup and went and sat in the corner and just ate it. So, you know, actually just if you involve these elements of breakfast, and I know it's meant to be eaten, but if you do involve these elements of breakfast into everyday play, it's just a way of these children being able to completely process how they feel about it. If they're going into Magic Breakfast sessions for the first time, playing outside of that environment might help them to feel more comfortable. And so, yeah, just providing it for any play, not just in the session as well, is really helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you both. And I'm just going to see maybe for a final question, really kind of forward looking to you, Martin, if we could, you know, build one area of understanding or kind of add one thing to our research program that would unlock additional capacity, capability to advocate and to really make a change in this space, what would you be looking to, or what are you looking to explore in future research programs at Magic Breakfast?
So one of the things that I'm interested to understand is when I touch on the attainment gap between students in SEND schools compared to non-SEND students. One of the interesting things in the research sector now, I guess, is the debate around whether or not we currently measure attainment in the right way and the correct way for SEND students, and whether or not it actually makes sense to compare those students to non-SEND students. And so conducting a research to understand the attainment at students specifically in the SEND schools that we support, and understanding what that would mean for their kind of future life opportunities would be very much something that not only I think would be interesting, but I think it would be able to inform our advocacy work in terms of supporting SEND students specifically.
Brilliant. Thanks, Martin. As we know, we tend to measure what matters. So understanding what matters is a key and important factor in terms of setting out measurement for any government policy or future directions. So with that, and conscious of time, I want to thank our brilliant speakers for your contributions, for preparing for today, for sharing so much insight and all of that magic. Thank you, Lydia, for the Makaton tutorial. I'm sure people will be practicing, and I think everybody who has attended from Magic Breakfast is very grateful to know how to say Magic Breakfast. Just to let those of you who are attending know, if you've attended a Magic Morning before, you know Magic Breakfast loves to improve and learn, so please complete the survey that will be sent to you after the session, and feel free to share the link to the session with colleagues who might not have been able to join us this morning. So thank you all for joining. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and hopefully a sunnier week ahead of us. Thanks so much. Take care.